Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
This episode is brought to you by Founder Catalyst. If you're raising funds and you need to get yourself SCIS and EIS Advanced Assurance and you need some help with that, then stick around to find out how you can get 5% off of Founder Catalyst's services. Okay, and we're back for part 2. I'm here with Ben Beavers, the founder and CEO of Smarty Plants. If you haven't checked out part 1, I would advise that you do. I'm not going to tell you to. I'm not your boss or your dad, so do what you want. But it would probably be helpful because there's a lot of context and setup for what we're going to be talking about. And at the end of part 1, we were just talking about the Kickstarter campaign and the lead up to that. And I've still got some questions on that because it was super interesting. The data piece, especially what you were saying about the sort of just that little revelation of recognizing the sort of commonality between a lot of those sort of I'm going to say alpha, testers or whatever, that early community, that first community that you started putting together based on sort of buyer intent and other sort of signals, and how they all had that commonality of the interest of Disney. Like, did you set out especially with working with this agency, very intentionally to be quite data led in this the early stages of this sort of process, or was this something that you kind of just had to? You were like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have to take this route if we want to be more efficient. Like, you know what I mean? Was there a lot of intentionality there, or was it just a decision that was made kind of on the cuff?
And they are data driven. From my background, am very, very data driven. So they have a structure which was super useful. I think and if you talk to Soren, who's the guy who worked most closely with me during it, I think he will tell you that I took it to the extreme. I was very, very into the things that moved the needle, because I think it's really important with data. You can get lost in it, and it can start providing that it's law of diminishing returns. So you've got to look at your data in it and outside of it to say what actually matters here, and what are we doing that's shifting things on that. So I was very focused on making sure that we were moving the needle on the things that actually converted into whatever it was that we were trying to target at that point, whether that was email signups, whether that was reservation deposits, or during the campaign, whether that was sales.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose because it can be quite overwhelming, especially when you're collecting data in so many different places across so many different with different tools and metrics and so on. I imagine it could be quite easy to get lost in it. How do you know what to focus on? Like, I mean, I know that's probably quite a broad question, but
I think it's an important question to ask, because ultimately sales, that's what matters. Are you selling?
So something that's moving the needle, basically. So it's got to be sort of focused on that side of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you selling? Are you selling profitably? And that's ultimately what you care about. That's not always the thing to focus on, because you've got a funnel and you need to move people down the funnel. And if you're trying to convert people down those different layers, then you're going to have to pour so much money into the top of that is going to be wasted to start seeing what drops out of the bottom of it. So you need to know what are the different stages of the funnel that we're trying to get people through, and then how do I try and get a really good conversion rate on there before moving to the next bit. And then overall, once you've gone on that journey, you're going, okay, we're pretty confident we've got a good process here. You want to be looking at what's your overall sales number, but you want your conversion numbers in between, and you want to know how are people getting through your funnel, and are people dropping out at a rate that you wouldn't expect at certain parts of it. So do you need to go back and then look at optimizing whatever it is at that particular point? And I can bring it to life, I guess, with the specific things that we focused on over the time. The agency's got a 3-step process where you're testing your ads. So the first thing you focus on is your imagery. So you come up with 4 or 5 very different images, and you have a generic headline, a generic call to action, and then these different images. And you test those and see what's giving you the best click-through rate, because you're not getting any conversion on the other side of that. That's unlikely. So what is it that's giving you the best click-through rate of those? When you've got the image that's doing best, then you look at some of the text in there and you go, right, let's try 5 different problem statements or 5 different descriptions, see what works with that. And then once you've got the winner from that, you go for your call to action. You go, right, okay, which of these is working best? At the end of that, you've got an ad that you're reasonably confident is okay. It's quite good. It's going to drive traffic reasonably reliably, ignoring the fact that ads depreciate over time. But you've then got a starting point that you can then start iterating and testing things from. But you've got that baseline of this is what we want to try and beat through click-through rate, and then ultimately through sign up and reservation deposits. This is still part of the sort of reservation campaign, but then you're going to look, you've got your landing page, so you're getting them to click through to something, and that something is your landing page. That's got a bit of product description, and ultimately what you want to get out of that landing page is an email. So there's an email collection form on a couple of different points on that, and that's how you're measuring the conversion rate of your landing page. You've then got a 2-stage process after that where you're trying to collect the reservation deposit. So you enter your email, you go through to a landing page that says, great, are you interested in this special deal? If you are, click through. So then you're able to see, are people interested in that deal? And then people put their card details in and make the payment. And then you go, right, have people converted? So you can look at your ads with your click-through rate. You can look at your landing page conversion, like how good are you at converting people to your to give you their email with your landing page conversion. Then your sort of add to cart. Is your offer compelling? Are people doing it? And then at the end, are people actually going to pay? You've got your sort of add to cart to VIP conversion that I called it. So you can then look at all of those different things. And when I say you need to focus on sales, that's important, because your click-through rate is only important at the front end to know how do you drive people through. But if you optimize for a higher click-through rate, you could end up with people clicking through who actually don't want to reserve. And then if you try and optimize for that, then you're going to end up with a worse output. So you do need to measure all the way through, keep on coming back to what is the ultimate end metric that you're trying to convert, because you'd rather to have people clicking, you'd rather an ad that clicks through half as much but gives 4 times as many conversions, because then you've got twice as much overall. So you need to figure all of those different things out. When you start optimizing, this is where your community comes in really helpful, because you can start speaking to them and you can start testing out, okay, if I talk about this problem, what language do they use when they talk back to me? Because you want to speak to them in their own language. So you need to validate if the problem works. Like, do people recognize that problem? Great. You can do that through conversations with them, with people outside. You can do that through targeted ads. But then you want to look at the language, and it can be quite hard. I find it can be quite hard if you're not part of a given community to know the language and the things that they use to describe the problem or to describe the solution. But you can get that from engaging with them, and then take that back and run that as part of your ads and see, okay, are we getting people to resonate? You can obviously split that by different audiences and different groups as well. But I think at that point you go beyond a person trying to do this, and you probably need a team to start optimizing. So you obviously don't make an industry of it if you haven't got the capacity to handle it. But you can do a lot. You can do a lot by taking a really structured approach and going, at this point, this is the thing that I need to optimize, and these are the 2 or 3 tests that we're running at the moment to try and do A/B tests to try and optimize the landing page conversion or whatever else it is.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because this is stuff that, as a CCO, in my prior roles as CCO, I'd have to work on quite a bit. And the starting point is always, and even as an advisor to some degree, this subject matter comes up in sort of a lot more of a proto way, which is this idea of early on being very clear, at least on what you'd hope your customer journey looks like, and designing that customer journey out, and having very clearly defined stages, whether it's from a pure sales driven customer journey or pipeline process, or pure marketing, or the combination of the two. And you've touched on some really, really important points here for those looking to build a business, which is to be hyper aware of this, and I would say get a handle on it as soon as possible, because as you very rightly pointed out, you're not looking. You shouldn't be looking at converting someone from the beginning to the very end. You shouldn't be looking, and this even goes from a more of a sort of soft sales skills perspective, right? If you're speaking to someone, the reason why we say pitch slapping as a negative term is because what you're essentially attempting to do is trying to get someone from the beginning of the funnel, the beginning of the stage, to move all the way to the end without going through any of the steps in between. That's why it feels like an unnatural thing to do, and often doesn't work. What you should be looking at doing, at least in my view, and I have a feeling that's pretty much what you've explained to us, is focusing on, how do I get them to close on the next step? That's all you're looking at, the next step. And then in that step, what can we do to convert them to, get them to close on the next step? So the closing aspect of it isn't to go all the way to the end to ultimately convert and be a lifelong customer. It's just to convert to the next step. And like you said, what are the common attributes for those that are, of all the people that are converting to the next step? And then you look at it holistically and go, okay, so now we know we've got the data across all of those different steps, all of those attributes of those ideal customer profiles that convert seamlessly and without too much friction, etc. And we've got a very holistic view then of what we need to do at the top and how that affects the entire customer journey and results in a satisfied, as well. That's the other important thing too, a satisfied customer, whether that's NPS scores or whatever customer feedback, etc. I mean, it sounds complex because it is, but the starting point isn't. It's always just, that you build on top of it, right? And the starting point to me is always just have a sense of what that customer journey would look like, what the ideal customer journey would look like, and then work towards it. It's like, do you want them to have these feelings, experience these experiences, make these decisions? That's got to be your intent, I think, for your organization. You have to have that from the beginning, just as much as it's exciting to get excited about the product or the problem you're solving. It's like, okay, great, you've done that now, and you're making headway on that. But now sit back and think, what do you want the customer experience and that customer journey to look like? Because then you can start building these strategies in a much more intentional way, as opposed to just kind of shooting in the dark.
Absolutely, and I agree. It's complex, and for me, that was the value of having the agency, because they could help me. They've seen thousands of projects launch, so they can catch the clangers, they can catch the really big mistakes up front and go, no, don't do that. Just this is the better way of phrasing it, or this is the better way of approaching it. So it shortcuts a lot of that learning process. It gives you that structure you're working to, and there's somebody that's helping to keep you on track and bring you back to it, so you don't end up down this weird rabbit hole where you're trying to optimize for something and completely miss the point.
Very easy to do, because I mean, like we just said, there's so many aspects to that, what we've just what we're unpacking here, that I mean, just like with data, in general, I mean, it's very easy to start getting pulled into the wrong directions. You're definitely going to need people around you, whether that's an agency or co-founders, friend, whatever, just to keep you say, this might be a false positive, this, et cetera, right? Yeah.
And it helps as well to have, they give you the metrics, and they say, look, this is your target conversion rate for your click-through rate. This is your target landing page conversion rate. So they give you these numbers, so you can kind of go, okay, this is good, this is awful. I'm going to put my energy here rather than here, because if you're trying to get 1 or 2% on a conversion rate on something that actually there's another area you could make a 5 or 6% conversion rate further up the funnel, then focus on that. Don't try and hyper optimize down the other elements of it.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
And they've also got a community. So they've got a really, really active community on School, where you can go on, you post stuff, you post your questions, you post links to your landing page, you do it. And then you have people who are going on that journey, reviewing and learning and giving you lessons, because they're 2 months down the line. They can tell you that these were the things that they learned at that point. And then it's also cool, because when you're on Kickstarter, you're like, oh, I know these people. Like, I know the people behind that project, and I know the people behind it. So it feels more, I don't know, it felt more like a community when you're on there, because you're sort of cheering on the other projects on the campaign or on the platform as well.
I mean, it just goes to show, man, community is so important. And I think a community-led strategy for any business is important, but also from the the perspective of being a founder, being part of the community. We have this conversation quite a lot on this show about the importance of surrounding yourself by other people who are doing similar things to you, or tangentially similar to you, and why that's so useful. But it sounds like we get what's the name of this agency again? What are they called?
Launch Boom.
Launch Boom.
Launch Boom, yeah.
Well, there you go. We're giving them a free ad today, basically. But yeah, feel free to send me the link afterwards, and we'll pop them in the description if people want to check them out. And who knows, maybe they could be a future sponsor of the show, because I'm sure people will be interested in learning about them. That's super cool. Like it's just really interesting. I mean, it like I said, it's something that's quite difficult, I think, to wrap your head around. This concept of the journey and these steps and closing on each step. I mean, just to take it to a lot more of a traditional sales kind of analogy or version of it, however you want to phrase it. Like I was using that example of a great example actually is going to networking events. And now people, you always meet those people at networking events who take the wrong approach, which is to walk up to someone. And I get this I used to get this a lot more when I was an active angel investor, and I'd have a badge that said angel investor. And you can imagine like the people that would come up and just be like, "Hi, Greg, my name is," and then they would just try and close me there and then. They'd be like, "This is everything about business, and we're raising, 250K SEIS, and I'd love to get a conversation." It's like, whoa, dude, like, step one is to just make an initial connection. Like that's the one thing that you want to close on, like, and the best way to do that isn't to come up and actually talk about yourself. The best way to do that is to come up and ask that person about them. Like that's how we strike a conversation, like you don't, in a party, you don't go up to a random stranger and just tell them everything about yourself and then, ask them out on a date straight away. Like it's just, it's just a bit weird. So it's, that's a good example of what not to do. And I think the same is true with, digital advertising, marketing, building a community. You're just at that early stage, you're just trying to sell a click. At that early stage, that's what you're trying to sell. You're just trying to convince someone to tap or to click a button. And that's step number one. And there's a lot of iteration that even goes into that, which is also another reason why I tend to talk a lot about, unless I think you're in your very unique space of physical products, crowdfunding, etc., to avoid doing that as a way of trying to drive early track, because it's very lengthy, very expensive, And I imagine this wasn't a cheap endeavor to do all this early on. So I imagine if you don't mind me asking, did you have to sort of put a fair amount of money aside? Were you still working in the firm at this time? Like, how did you go about that financially?
Yeah, and I'm quite happy to share numbers behind it as well. So I think people say hardware is expensive. I think anything can be expensive. Anything can be cheap. You can buy a very cheap car if you 200 quid, you can get one, or you can spend $250,000 on a G-Wagon. It's probably not that extreme, but I think there are things you can do to do things more cheaply, and there are ways of approaching things in a more expensive way. With hardware, if you go to an agency and say, "I'd like you to build this product," it's going to cost a bomb. If you go, "What is it that I'm actually trying to do?" And first of all, you're just trying to see, is it possible to be built? Then you can do that a tenner off Amazon, buying the components and then figuring out how you plug it all into a breadboard, and then buy yourself a soldering iron and do all of that. You can find people to do freelance electronics engineering and pick up and build stuff out for you. So I think by necessity took quite a measured approach with how we were spending. So initially I put I think it was about 15K capital into the business. I had left my job, so I was also running through my savings. So the Kickstarter was about a month and a half away from me not being able to pay my bills. So that was a really scary time, but it went well. So that's okay. We're out the other side of that.
That's the risk reward thing right there, isn't it?
Yeah. But so I put about sort of 15K into it, and then we raised just under 30K with a friends and family round, which was just before the Kickstarter, and that sort of went into all of the advertising and all of the things that you've got to do during the campaign to get it. We sold 140K of product and probably got just over 100K of that after various fees and commissions and all of the other things that you might not necessarily expect to come out of it. So we've got to where we are on sort of about 40K of money into the business. We've still got a reasonable amount of money in the bank from the Kickstarter. Obviously, at the start, you kind of go, "Oh, I want to fundraise," because you go into the startup world, and it's one of the first things that you sort of see is like, "Oh, you got to fundraise," and I think there's a lot of success is equated with fundraising, and they're not one to one. Like, just because you've raised a lot of money doesn't mean you've built a good business. Sometimes you're building a business that does need that funding to be able to get to where it is able to be profitable, and that's fine. But that is a particular type of business. For an early stage business, it's tricky. Everybody's got their sort of different sort of personal circumstances, but I was able to do this a lot more cheaply than I'd expected. We're now at the point where we are there is a gap in our cash flow, and so we're going, right, we need to raise, but we're raising because there is a gap in our cash flow, which means we need to raise to be able to be able to hit profitability. I think if I'd have been able to raise earlier, I would probably be in the same position I am now, with less equity, probably more commitments, and having spent a lot more money. So roundabout way, I think there's not a right answer, but I think you can go a lot further than you expect. You can go a lot further than you expect if you're forced to be very prudent with the way that you spend your money. And I think because of that, I've now got a sense of what things should cost. And I'll give you a sort of approximate range. When I spoke to a agency about manufacturing the electronics, they were like, "Oh, to do the electronics, they're not including the enclosure, not the plastics around the outside of it." They were like, "That's going to be somewhere between 100, 150K." And I got to the point they were going to get me to on less than 5. So you can definitely take different approaches, but be creative about it, right? And you're also sacrificing speed with that, because we were running slower because we couldn't just throw money at the problem, which was the right answer for us at the time. It might not always be the right answer for us. Sometimes you want to pay more to move more quickly, but for us at that time, the critical path was on the Kickstarter and building out those email lists. So if we'd had a product 2 months earlier, we wouldn't have launched the Kickstarter 2 months earlier. So better be on track with that, and with a lot more money in the bank to spend on marketing, and therefore get a bigger Kickstarter. I think I went off on a slightly different tangent there. I can't remember the original question, but
no, that's the great thing about this show. But no, that's super. Yeah, that's really interesting, and you're in a great position to raise now because, of course, you have done all that hard work. You've got that prototype. You've got far more information. You've got a community. You've got pre-sales. So I mean, it's a very strong position to be in versus you trying to raise a significant round, based on a far earlier stage without all of that or far less of that. So it sounds to me like you've done it in a way, a right way. I wouldn't say the right way, because there are always many ways, like you've pointed out, but it's certainly a way that I think has put you in a very strong position. When did you announce this raise? And I don't know, what was this, like the seed? Like not these titles really mean anything, but is it the seed? Is it the pre-seed?
We're going with pre-seed, but it's funny because when we're asked, we're like, are you pre-product? Are you pre-revenue? And we're like, oh, we're revenue generating, but we're kind of pre-product. Like, we got MVP, yeah. But it's a really, I don't know, when there's a form, it's like, hard to...
Yeah. And people get confused if you don't fit the exact mold of their preconceived notions of these things. It's really confusing.
Yeah, so we sort of, we started thinking about it, I think it was September-ish last year. But it was a slow start because, again, like, focus on the things that matter. Almost all of my energy pre-Christmas was focused on manufacturing and keeping that on track, because we had enough cash in the bank to keep us moving. But if the manufacturing kept being delayed, then we were going to run out of money eventually, and it was going to be harder to have those investor conversations. So in theory, raising from September-ish, but have really been focused post-Christmas, because super excited that one of my mentors who'd been working with us for about a year, and was director of products at a robotics startup. He left and joined us in January. So we've now got somebody who's got experience of taking products from idea to global distribution, running all of that, which means that's a weight off my shoulders. That is now being run far better, far more quickly, with much less energy from me. And now I've got the time to look at that and other things that I'm looking at as well. But now I'm properly focusing on fundraising.
Well, yeah, because this is the other thing. This is the huge and congratulations. That's awesome, by the way, having someone on the team like that. But this is the really sort of intimidating aspect of being a founder and building a company. Is, we've talked about this journey you've been on, and there's so many points where you can get dragged into the wrong thing, and be focusing on the wrong thing, and it is really difficult. Like, it's not like we get it right, all the time. We get it wrong a lot, and it's very much trial by fire. But raising, even in of itself as a stage, you need to be in a position where you have the time to do it, because it is a very intense thing. It's very time intensive, it's very energy intensive, and I often describe it as a full-time job in of itself, fundraising. So as a founder and as a CEO, if you've got other things that need your attention, you've got to look at this as very practically. Like, if we go fundraising, I am not going to be able to focus on these things. If they're mission critical, there needs to be others involved in this project to allow me to go off and do this. Or we need to be at a stage where these things can be lowered in priority, and then we can come back to them, or whatever it might be. But these are the constant daily decisions that are being made by a founder, which I don't think people really truly appreciate until either they're doing it or until they're working closely with founders to see it firsthand. Like, even just going back to what you were saying about just starting, right? Like, you can, and you were fiddling with the electronics yourself and sort of blew the battery up, like you said in part one, like taking the decision to go, okay, got this idea. Presumably you did some sort of idea validation. So asked around, right? Friends, family, whatever it might be. Like, I'm thinking of doing this thing. What do you think? Just taking that initial decision to ask around before then going, I'm going to learn how this works. That seems like a really simple decision, but there are actually a million other ways you could have gone about that probably would have been far worse, which would be to engage immediately with companies to do it and get quotes, and then start feeling down and depressed. Oh, there's no way of doing this. But actually, the sort of the, I don't know, I guess the bravest, I don't know if that's the right word, but the bravest and kind of, and simultaneously most stupid way of doing it is to just go, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to learn, like, you know what I mean? Like, and that is the kind of decision making that you need, I think, to be somewhat, to have some areas of success as a founder. It's just like, but then at the same time, like we were saying early on, knowing when you hit a barrier that's just like, this is too big for me, I'm going to need some help, like, but pushing it to, it's really hard. Like, there are no right answers here. This is all like, this is why I get really annoyed with advisors like me that kind of say, if you want to build a business, here's the 12 steps. It's like, fuck off. Like, you don't, every business is different. Every individual is different. Like, the resources they have access to is different. Like, stop it. Like, it has to be case by case. You have to know everything about that person, their circumstances, their personality, before you could even begin to advise them on how to get started, or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Raising investment is painful enough without getting bogged down in legal costs. That's why I'm using Founder Catalyst, today's sponsor for Peer, my startup's pre-seed raise. We've been lucky enough to have Sam, the CEO of Founder Catalyst, on the show before. Go and check out that episode. Their funding round service offers the most cost-effective way to produce funding round legals in the UK. It's just £1,495 excluding VAT, with no monthly fees or hidden extras, no matter how much you're raising. One Founder Catalyst customer recently raised 2.7 million and saved around £10,000 compared to the next option. If you're looking for SEIS, EIS Advanced Assurance, they've got a 100% success rate over the last 3 years. Founder Catalyst is built by founders for founders, and from my own experience, I can't recommend them enough. You can scan the QR code on the screen around here somewhere, or around there somewhere, I don't know, or use the link in the description for 5% off. Thank you to Founder Catalyst for sponsoring this episode. Now back to it.
I think that there's a lot of really interesting things in what you said, and I think
Oh, good, because I thought I was talking
it's
absolute shit. So thanks.
no. I think one of the things that I think is really interesting. There was sort of an implication there that there's a right way of doing it. When you look back, you're like, okay, this is the way. Because, or for me, for my circumstances, this was
Mm.
and I did try all of those things that you said, like, oh, it's brave to make this decision. I sort of went, these are all the options. Let's look at them and figure it out. And I went, too expensive, too hard, or whatever it is. Like, this feels like the best way. But I think for me, there's two things that I use that have taken from consulting that I think are just essential for moving quickly and effectively in the business. And the first thing is prioritization. And everybody talks about prioritization. The thing that um, I used to talk to sort of execs about prioritization. So you need to prioritize, and they were like, "Yeah, we prioritize. Of course we do." So okay, talk to me. What does prioritization mean to you? Like we say like these are the important things. You need to go do these important things. Like, okay, that's not prioritization though. Prioritization is saying these are the important things. We're going to do these three. We're not going to do these seven because we want to focus on these three, and these three things need to get done. It's not throwing lots of things onto people and then going, the team's crap. They haven't delivered anything. It's about saying, right, I'm in charge of the constraints within this organization. So I need to be able to go, these are the things that we're going to put into it. So I know that we get these out of the other end of it. So that's something that I'm very hard on myself with, is to say, what are the priorities? What are the things that you're focusing on? Because there are so many important things that need to be done. And some of those important things will kill the business, and some of those important things will not kill the business. So,
But sorry, just really quickly, another really important aspect of the consultative approach there as well is to assess what the available resources and skill sets are in order to help facilitate that prioritization, right? So you could say, okay, here's the list of 10 things that you are currently saying to me as priority, whereas every indication suggests to us that you only have the resources and skill sets and people available to tackle these three right now and deliver them in time. So you're going to have to push back all of these other seven and the timelines for them and the expectations for them and work and walk towards just these three. So it's it's about, and also to get these across the line in time and delivered at the highest possible sort of level. Basically, that's the sort of untold bit of it, which I guess what we're saying from an internal perspective, you have to do, but about yourself, which therefore takes an incredible amount of self-awareness, just in of itself, because you have to recognize, well, these are the things I am capable of, or I have the resources for, or I have the whatever. And that's a very difficult thing to do, because most of us can't be that sort of brutally honest or take that step back. So sorry to interrupt, but that was something that I just sort of observed while you were saying that.
You're right, and I think it sort of links quite nicely to the second point, that I think part of the challenge with that is you need to think strategically and tactically. But I think the mistake that most people make is they try and do both all of the time, and that's just, I mean, my brain's not big enough. I can't do that. Other people, maybe they can, but I cannot think strategically and tactically. It's too much. It's too hard. It's too stressful. It's all of those different things. So it's important that you separate them. And I think something that's important to make peace with is that you are going to make the wrong decisions. There's not a right decision, but you're going to do things that are wrong. And so what you need to be comfortable with is that you're making the best decisions you can, and that you've got a very quick feedback loop to figure out when you've made a bad decision and you need to change it. So you can't go, I need to find the right answer to this. You need to go, what's the best answer that we can give, and how do we make sure if it's wrong that we hear about it and we get that feedback loop.
That's the fail fast aspect of what, when people mention that's what they mean, right?
Yeah, that's it. I'll flash this up. I think the writing on it's going to be sort of too small, but I live and breathe this. This is what is called a sort of 90-30 day plan. So ever since the start of the company, it was me at the start, obviously, sat down at the start of the quarter and said, what are the goals for the quarter? And these are different work streams for the business. So what are the goals for the quarter? And then at the start of the month, you go, what do I need to achieve to get on track for these? Then at the end of the month, you review, how have you done? You score it: green, good; yellow, partial; red, no. And then you set your goals for the next month. So obviously this is January and February, and we haven't got March yet because we're not into March. But for me, that gives the segregation between the strategic and the tactical. You take the time to go, what are the strategic things that we need to do as part of that quarterly and monthly planning? You know that you've thought about the important things. You've got that monthly check-in to see if anything needs to adjust, but it then frees you up the rest of the time to just execute. You just go, these are the goals that I need to hit. This is where I need to be. And I don't need to keep coming back and thinking, well, what about this? What about this? Because I've done that. I've done that and it's there. So at the end of every day, I look at that. Where am I on? And this is not just me. This is the team. This is the organization that are working on this. But I can see, are we on track? Are we off track? Well, where are we off track? Because you're always not hitting something. But you can ask the question of, is that okay for us to be off track on? And it probably is, but you want to make sure that nothing that is super important is off track, because if you're off track because you're focusing on something else, and it's probably because you've underestimated something else. And if that's more important, then it is the right thing to do for you to miss those targets. But if it's not, you've got a mechanism to figure that out pretty quickly, that actually, hang on a minute, we're spending time somewhere we shouldn't, and this might hurt us in 2-3 weeks if we lose this time. So you can refocus back, and the team can refocus back as well.
Yeah. So is that how you solve for that problem of not being able to, which I don't believe anyone can really be simultaneously sort of tactical and strategic, essentially? Is that your sort of attempt or your framework to solve for that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the bridge between, you've got your big strategy of these are all the things, and then you go, how do you make your strategy actionable? And you go, well, this is the 90-30 days, like these are the bigger picture things that we need to be considering, and then you can go in and you can just deliver on that underneath that. So
yeah, I think that's super important. Yeah, because I think so. One thing that a lot of founders I speak to tell me that I experience, I'm sure you do too, is this issue of feeling, for either a small amount of time during a day or for multiple days, sometimes just completely frozen. So, really just feeling overwhelmed, and getting kind of that what's the term that people use all the time? I can't remember what the term is now, but people use the term all the time. Just feeling like, completely burnt out, basically, the burnout feeling, or that when they sit down at their desk, they kind of look and just, everything, they just procrastinate and everything kind of goes blank, and they just don't really know where to start. I personally believe that I think you've just hit the nail on the head as to what causes that. It is when someone is attempting to be both think strategically and tactically at the same time. There's they kind of cancel each other out, and it's just overwhelmed. It fries your brain, because you're trying to do long-term sort of big picture thinking at the macro level, whilst also trying to think short-term micro level sort of goals. And those two things just can't, just fry your neurons, basically. So what you've described there as an approach, I think, is an incredibly important one. But here's the thing, though: if you aren't a good written or verbal communicator, I think you struggle. I know that might be a really odd sort of tenuous link, but I firmly believe that being an effective communicator, both written and verbally, is probably the most important skill set for a founder to have, especially, or a leader to have of any capacity. Because without that, I don't think you can effectively execute on the things that you're describing. To be able to put these things across, either to yourself or to other people, to effectively prevent these kinds of issues arising. That's a really firm belief, and for a whole myriad of other reasons that a lot of other skill sets are tied into from a leader perspective. But I think that has to be a fundamental starting point, to be honest. And I know we're really boiling it down to some real fundamentals that might seem a bit simplistic, but if people are looking for that, then there's one for you, right?
I think there's a skill in being able to write and communicate, that you have to be able to structure your own thoughts to be able to do that. And if you don't have structure in your own thoughts, it's very hard to build a structure around yourself that works for you. And this works for me. It's not going to work for everybody, but it works really well for me. So this isn't the golden bullet or silver bullet, whatever
it's not one size fits all, but it will probably work for a lot of people.
But I think as you say, I think it takes work to apply structures to things, but applying structures to things is what allows you to deliver effectively. And I say this as somebody who's got ADHD that is so naturally unstructured and absolutely hate it. Like, hate having structure around me. But I like I like achieving things. I like doing stuff. I like doing things that I said that I do. And I'm aware of the difference in my effectiveness if I have structure or if I don't have structure. So it's kind of it doesn't matter whether I want to do it. It doesn't matter whether I like doing it. What matters is if this other thing is more important to me than me wanting or liking or feeling this thing in the moment. If that other thing's more important to me, then I need to do this because that is ultimately going to be what gets me there. And I had somebody say a long time ago, they used the phrase, discipline is freedom. And the more that I think about it, the more it resonates with me because applying that discipline around yourself and to yourself gives you the freedom to focus on the things that you want to, rather than just deal with all of the mess and everything around you and try and sort of navigate through murk and mud and whatever else. So it's hard to do and it slips every now and again. But I think what's important is figuring out what structure works for you and then realizing when you're feeling burnt out or when you're feeling whatever it is that just check back in on that, because if that slipped, then that might well be it, and it happens.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
Having that as a conscious level of awareness is helpful to navigate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny as well because you mentioned ADHD, and a lot of people I speak, a lot of founders I speak to, I've been told by multiple people I probably have it too, and I'm like, okay, cool. So what? Like, if I got an official diagnosis, I'd be like, okay, great. Like it makes no difference to me. Probably, it doesn't matter. But the interesting thing is, like, what I spoke to a lot of people that have mentioned similar to kind of how you did there, that like because I have this way of thinking or working or whatever, that having this structure is important to me. I would argue that way of working, that or some form of working that's similar to what you've described and shown us there, is important for everyone, regardless. Like, because the reality is that trying to do anything remotely similar to building a company or managing a large team or anything in life, I mean, raising a family, for Christ's sake, or managing a household. At the end of the day, we feel infinitely more satisfied if we can look back at the end of the day and say, I ticked off at least one or two things off that list. Because as human beings, that's the way our minds are kind of designed. But biochemically, we are designed, and neurologically, we're kind of designed to be completionists and to see, and we want to see patterns, we want to see progress. So I'm literally just saying that. I'm only saying this really just, I guess, to make anyone that's listening or watching feel a little bit more at ease. That, I mean, you don't have to be diagnosed with something to feel satisfied, to see that you're making progress on something, but also that it's okay to feel frustrated occasionally. That's kind of part of the journey. But if you want to do something about that, one of the most effective ways is sometimes just to make a list, like and just tick things off. And even if you just tick one thing off, like going back to what we were saying earlier about the sort of the whole customer journey piece with the Kickstarter and so on, like if you're going to sit down and come up with an idea and you just don't know where to start, that can be one of the first things you do. And it might be that you just have two steps. It might be that it's like, go and speak to people in the street, ask them for a $5 to buy my product. It might be as simple as that to start off with, but it will grow and it will develop later. I think one of the things that can cause a lot of paralysis in people is listening to conversations like this and many others like that, and hearing people who are a lot further along in their journey or in their company and things like that, hearing all of these quite complex processes in place and thinking, oh my God, I need to do all that. So no. What you don't realize is the list started with one thing on it. Like, but the point is the list started. Do you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Completely. There's, for a start, when you look back, you forget a lot of the difficult things that go through it. So I think you've always got a slightly rosy view of the past. And I, like, when with this structure, I've been applying it for 5-6 years professionally before I
Right.
started using it in the business. It's also a well-refined structure for me that I've used, and I've delivered hundreds of engagements using this approach. So absolutely, but they don't look at that and go, oh right, that's the answer. It's not. And I think one of the conversations I had, I guess two anecdotes. One of the conversations I had super early on. I've got a sort of friend who started a business and 2 years ahead, and when I told him I started this, he was like, do you just want to have a weekly call? And I've had a call with him every week since, just checking in on everything that's going on. And I remember a lot of those early stage calls, I was just sitting there going, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like this is like genuinely terrifying. I'm like, I've left my job. I'm not getting paid. I feel like I'm playing pretend at building a business. This is the thing that I think is really hard to get to wrap your head around is you just feel like you're playing pretend and you have no right to, because you haven't got traction yet. You've just got this idea and your partner is like super supportive, but you've stopped bringing income into the house, and you're doing that because you've got this fun idea. Like the guilt and the pressure with that is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And all of the things that I'm saying, like that was the reality of that, particularly at the start before we got traction, is every day you're going like, what am I doing? And then you have some days where you're like, this is amazing, like, it's brilliant, the best thing I've ever done. And then other days where you're like, wow, like I can't believe I'm being so selfish. I can't believe I'm being so stupid. I can't believe whatever else. But the important thing is that you keep going. Like listen to the signs. Like if you're seeing the right things, like carry on. But it's hard. It's hard to do that. And I heard the other thing that made me feel so much better about everything was I listened to a clip of Elon Musk saying that the best description he'd ever heard of a startup was staring into the abyss while eating glass, because you're constantly looking at the death of your own startup and it's just painful to do it. And I sort of went, well, if that's how Elon Musk feels, then that really makes me feel better about how I feel, because it's not that something's wrong if it feels like this. This is just what it feels like. You've chosen to start this business, and you get used to this feeling. It doesn't mean you like the feeling. It doesn't mean you enjoy it. But
you have to come to
that's
terms
what it
with
feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that's in some way, in a lot of ways, in fact, almost exactly, that's how I've come to explain. This is going to sound really tangential, but how I've come to explain the dealing with depression and anxiety, which I've dealt with at numerous stages in my life. And one of the ways I learned to deal with that, many years ago, was in the exact same way. It wasn't to say, to beat myself up and go, why do I feel this way? What's wrong with me? I'm an idiot, and then just spiral and get worse. It was to say, sometimes I'm going to feel like this. That's the way I am. And to come to terms with it and to accept it, and then so that if and when that wave of anxiety, more so anxiety in my later years, as opposed to depression, thankfully, but as and when those waves come over me, which absolutely gets exacerbated from being a founder at times, it's like, okay, I know this happens every now and then, and that's part of it. And you absolutely have to take that approach, but the problem lies is when you don't speak to other founders, or don't engage within that world, or listen to other people talking about it, whether it's Elon Musk or just, the guy who runs a business down the end of your street, whatever it might be. If you don't engage with that, you don't know that to be true. And so your perception of it is everyone's doing great, everyone's happy all the time, and being incredibly successful. But the reality is very, very different from that, as you've pointed out.
I mean, nobody wants to say they've left their job and started this company and they're questioning every decision they've ever made. There's a huge amount of, wrongly, I think, but there's a huge amount of face associated with it, where you're going, oh, my old colleagues, what are they going to think of me? And so it's scary. And when you talk to people, you also want to talk about the things that excite you with the business, which is why I often have the conversation about strategy, even though that has so little to do with my sort of time day to day, because that's the exciting, that's interesting, that's the fun stuff. But the reality of it is that is such a small part of the day to day, and the reality of the way it feels is, yeah, like hopefully you have more good days than you do bad days, but it's tough. It
Yeah,
is tough,
and to
and
an
there are
extent,
really tough days.
you are what you say and articulate as well, right? So there's this fine balance between speaking with someone, like you said, once a week that can listen to you and hear how you're feeling, but also not vocalizing these things too frequently to the point where you start really buying into them and spiral into them. So, and then, like you
Mm,
say, there are people in our lives that you have to be very careful with who you do say these things to, because you do want other people to be your backers and to believe in you. So if you're constantly telling them that you feel nervous or down or whatever it is about the decision that you've made, if these people have then influence back on you, the feedback loop is going to be somewhat negative. So whether that's a partner or or a potential investor or whatever it might be, like at the end of the day there's going to be a feedback loop there. You can't be sat there sort of eroding confidence of yourself to them if there's a feedback, which is the irony, because if like with a partner, for example, with my wife, like I am very conscious about I think in any relationship, this is true about the level of vulnerability that you put out, because you do have to strike that balance. Because if you want that person to have a certain amount of belief in you as well, and you don't want to erode that belief, but you also want to be vulnerable in order to open that dialogue and have those conversations. I mean, now we're going into sort of the territory of relationship advice, but it is a balance to be struck, and very carefully, because then at a time where you are feeling low, then you want that person to acknowledge it, understand where it's coming from, and then give you that boost, and not say things like, well, maybe you should just quit because if you keep complaining about this. You know what I mean? Like, but then at the same time, so it's tough. And yeah, maybe there's an ego thing too, like you say, like you don't want to go to your ex-colleagues and for them to think that you're not doing well and that you made the bad decision. You want them to think that you're doing okay. It's
yeah,
Human beings are complex, man.
I think it's time well spent trying to understand yourself
Mm,
and to be able to understand how to communicate what it is that you think and feel and what you look for when you want stuff coming back to you. and
yeah.
and and I think with your partner, y- it's it, you've got to be able to share, you've got to be able to be vulnerable, but you've also got to be able to communicate what it is that you want in that moment, and
What it
actually,
is you're excited about.
yeah,
Yeah.
but also like when you're sitting there going, oh, this is terrible, this is awful, like you in that moment you want them to come back and say, but you've done all of these things before, and you'll be fine doing this, like I believe in you. You don't want them to say, oh, it's that difficult, like why don't you give up, you could.
Right.
I mean, maybe you do, like, and there is
But
probably
that's
a
why you've got to
point
share
where
the wins and the
you do want
losses.
them to be able to say, look,
Maybe.
seriously, yeah. And
Maybe.
and
But
and look, this is part of the reason that I started the company in the first place, was because with my job I was super open and honest with my partner about it, and she just got to the point where she was like, look, you're so unhappy, you can't carry on doing this, and then I was sort of saying, but what about, like, we were speaking about the business idea, and she was like, well, like, it cannot be worse than this. Like,
oh
you're
dear, how
not gonna
little does
feel
she
you're
know?
not gonna feel yeah, well, but
But no, yeah, I see what you're saying.
it's yeah, it's harder, but I'm more motivated and engaged with it, and I think
It's more
I
fulfilling.
feel like, yeah, that's it. It's fulfillment and pride as well. I can
Mm.
be it's fulfilling, but you can be proud of what you're doing, and that helps you face into a lot of the different, well, all of the horrendous things that you sign up to
Mm.
unknowingly when you become a founder.
Yeah, it makes that abyss just that little less dark and scary, I guess, when at least you know that you're doing, and that you're backed by people who care about you. That certainly helps. Yeah, yeah, it's tough, man. Human beings, what a weird bunch we are with our complicated brains. But look, I'm going to have to let you go because we've reached the end of the show already. Although there's a ton more stuff that I would have wanted to explore with you, but we'll have to do that another day, I guess. Maybe we'll have to get you back and see where things are and see how the raise. I mean, obviously keep me posted anyway on all of that. It's super exciting. When are you hoping? Just really quickly, when are you hoping to get this round closed? Have you kind of got a timeline in mind?
um, No, we don't, because we're
Okay.
we're we're over raising. So at the moment, we're
Okay.
taking stuff in through through ASAs, and we are close to covering the gap in the cash flow as it is. So we are pushing to raise so that we know that we've got the runway to carry on, but the energy balance is going to split slightly once we get that. I'm not. Well, yeah, I'll be going back to more let's grow the business and sell products we don't need to raise activities once we know that we've got enough money in the bank to survive.
Fantastic. And we'll put please send me the Kickstarter, or I'll find the Kickstarter link and put it in the description. So that'll be in there, as well as your LinkedIn profile link. If that's okay with you, I typically put that in there. Yeah, people can reach out, website, all of that. So all the information will be in the description of this episode. So if you're listening, watching, and want to go and check it out, want to go and pre-order and back the products and get your hands on one to save your plants, then you can do that as well. Anyone else you want to shout out, or any other links you want me to pop in the description?
We'll put Launch Boom in the description as well. But no, I think it's been great. It's been great chatting to you. It's been a really enjoyable conversation. It has gone on some very interesting directions.
That's the show, man. Yeah, likewise. It's been great chatting. And we'll definitely have to catch up again soon. But good luck with everything. Thanks so much again for joining me. And for those listening and watching, please go and check out all the links in the description. Follow all the things Ben is doing, and Smarty Plants, by the way, awesome name, is doing also. All right. Thanks very much for joining me. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Please like and subscribe. Or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.